Have you ever wondered where our world began? Not in the fires of creation, but in the minds of our ancestors.
In the stories they told, the cities they built, and the laws they wrote.
These are the echoes of eternity, the legacies of the ancient civilizations that shaped our present and continue to define our future.
Our story begins here, in a sun-scorched land between two rivers.
This region, part of the Fertile Crescent, is often called the cradle of civilization, and for good reason. The agricultural revolution fundamentally reshaped human society. The transition from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle to settled farming. This agricultural abundance was the critical factor that allowed for the birth of the world's first cities. To manage the semi-arid climate, Mesopotamians engineered sophisticated irrigation systems. This new urban complexity created a highly stratified social hierarchy. At the apex was the king, seen as the god's representative on earth, holding ultimate authority. Below him were priests, who held immense power as intermediaries with the gods, and scribes, who were highly respected for their essential work recording laws, trade, and history using their profound invention, cuneiform writing. The middle tier consisted of merchants and artisans, while the largest class was made up of farmers. At the very bottom were slaves, often prisoners of war or debtors, who had no rights. Over centuries, power shifted. The Akkadians created one of the world's first empires. Later, the Babylonian king Hammurabi created his famous legal code, establishing that justice should be codified by the state. Then, a new, formidable power arose, the Neo-Assyrian Empire. As the first world empire, its dominance was built on a revolutionary military machine. They created a professional, standing army armed with iron weapons, giving them a deadly advantage. They were masters of siege warfare and psychological terror, but also brilliant administrators, managing their vast domain with an efficient provincial system and a state communication network whose speed wasn't surpassed for millennia.
To the west, another great civilization was being forged by a river. The Greek historian Herodotus called Egypt the gift of the Nile.
For thousands of years, the Nile's predictable annual flood deposited rich, black silt along its banks,
creating a strip of incredible fertility in the midst of a vast desert.
This gift allowed Egyptian civilization to flourish in relative security and stability for over 3,000 years. At the heart of this society was the pharaoh, a king who was also considered a living god. The pharaoh was the intermediary between the gods and humanity, responsible for maintaining Shma'at, the cosmic order of truth, balance, and justice. For the Egyptians, death was not an end. They believed the soul was complex, composed of parts like the Ka, or life force.
The individual's personality depicted as a human-headed bird, and the
the glorified spirit that could dwell with the gods. But for the soul to live on, the physical body had to be preserved. This belief drove them to perfect the art of mummification.
a sacred 70-day process to preserve the body in a lifelike form so the soul could recognize and repossess it.
The body was then covered in natron salt for 40 days to completely dehydrate it.
Once dried, it was stuffed with linen to restore its shape, anointed with oils, and then painstakingly
wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen bandages. Protective amulets were placed between the layers.
Finally, a mask, often of gold for a pharaoh, was placed over the head before the mummy was sealed in its sarcophagus.
Before the tomb was sealed, priests performed the opening of the mouth ceremony, touching the mummy's mouth and eyes with
To navigate this realm of monsters and treacherous gates, the deceased relied on the Book of the Dead.
The journey culminated in the Hall of Truth for the final judgment, the weighing of the heart.
I have not committed evil against mankind. I have not blasphemed a god.
Then, the god Anubis would place the person's heart on a scale, weighed.
If the heart was light and balanced with the feather, the soul was declared true of voice.
But if the heart was heavy with sin, it was thrown to the monster Amit, the devourer of souls.
At the same time that Egypt was building its pyramids, another great urban civilization was thriving in the Indus River Valley.
The Harappan civilization, named after one of its major cities, was the most widespread of the early ancient civilizations,
covering an area larger than ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. Yet, it remains the most enigmatic.
The cities of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa were marvels of urban planning, unparalleled in the ancient world. They were built on a precise grid system, with houses made of standardized, baked bricks. Most impressively, these cities featured sophisticated water management systems, including covered drains, private wells, and bathrooms in many homes, suggesting a strong emphasis on public sanitation and hygiene.
The people of the Indus Valley were skilled artisans and long-distance traders.
This script, containing hundreds of unique signs, is one of history's greatest unsolved puzzles.
Until it is deciphered, the thoughts, beliefs, and stories of this great civilization will remain lost to us.
Around 1800 BCE, this thriving civilization began to decline.
There is no evidence of a massive invasion or a single catastrophic event.
Instead, scholars theorize that a combination of factors, perhaps climate change that altered the course of rivers and
disrupted the monsoon patterns they relied on for agriculture, led to the gradual abandonment of their great cities. The Indus Valley Civilization faded into history, leaving behind its silent, well-ordered ruins and a profound mystery. Far to the east, another powerful civilization emerged along the fertile banks of the Yangtze rivers. The story of ancient China is one of dynasties, a continuous cycle of ruling families who claimed a mandate of heaven to govern. This mandate meant that the emperor had the divine right to rule, but only as long as he ruled justly and maintained harmony. Disasters and rebellions were seen as signs that a dynasty had lost its mandate. The late Zhou dynasty was a time of political fragmentation, but this chaos gave rise to a golden age of philosophy, known as the 100 Schools of Thought. Two of the most influential philosophies to emerge were Confucianism and Taoism. Confucianism, founded by Confucius, was a pragmatic philosophy aimed at restoring social harmony through benevolence, ritual, and filial piety. It argued that officials should be chosen for their intellect and integrity, not birth, a principle that led to the creation of Taoism, attributed to the sage Laozi, offered a more mystical path centered on the Tao, the natural force guiding all things. It advocated for Wu Wei, or governing least, arguing that too many laws disrupt natural harmony. While Confucianism provided the rigid structure for the state, Taoism acted as a philosophical counterbalance, influencing Chinese art, spirituality, and diplomacy.
But China's influence wasn't just philosophical, it was woven from a shimmering thread.
Legend and attributes the discovery of silk around 2700 BCE
to Empress Lei Zhu, when a cocoon fell into her hot tea and unraveled into a long, lustrous filament.
While a lovely story, archaeology confirms sericulture, or silk production, began in China during the Neolithic period.
The process was meticulous, cultivating mulberry trees to feed the Bombyx mori silkworms, allowing them to spin their cocoons, and then boiling the cocoons to kill the pupa and unwind the single, continuous thread.
For nearly 3,000 years, the method of sericulture was a fiercely guarded state secret, with smuggling silkworm eggs punishable by death.
Initially reserved for the emperor, silk was a powerful symbol of status and wealth. It even functioned as a form of currency. This monopoly gave China immense economic power, and the insatiable demand for this luxurious fabric, especially from the Roman Empire, led to the creation of the Silk Road. This vast network didn't just carry silk. It became a conduit for goods, ideas, religions, and cultures, fundamentally connecting the East and West for the first time. While these civilizations flourished across Africa and Eurasia, equally complex societies were rising independently in the Americas. In the tropical lowlands of south-central Mexico, the Olmec emerged around 1600 BCE.
Often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, their influence laid the groundwork for later civilizations
like the Maya and the Aztec. They are famous for their colossal stone heads, massive sculptures believed to be portraits of powerful rulers. The Olmec established many of the religious and cultural practices that would define Mesoamerica, including shamanism. Their art is filled with the were-jaguar, a hybrid human-jaguar figure, pointing to a complex mythology of transformation. They may have been the first civilization in the Western Hemisphere to develop a writing system, and are credited with developing the concept of zero.
Building on these Olmec foundations, the Maya created a civilization of breathtaking.
Their worldview was dominated by an intricate and highly sophisticated calendar system.
Fludurster, which was not one calendar, but several interlocking cycles. The two main cycles were the Dzolkin,
a 260-day sacred calendar used for divination and scheduling religious ceremonies, and
the Hab, a 365-day civil calendar for agriculture. Together, they formed a 52-year
calendar round, the end of which was a time of great cosmic renewal. To record history, they used the long count, a linear calendar that tracked days from a mythical start date in 3114 BCE. This calendar was profoundly political. Rulers and priests who could interpret the movements of the gods in the stars used this knowledge as a source of immense power. They used the calendar to legitimize their authority, timing key events like coronations, temple dedications, and even wars to align with auspicious dates, demonstrating their harmony with the cosmos. Our journey ends with the civilization whose legacy is perhaps most visible in the Western world today, Rome. First as a republic, and then as a mighty empire, to dominate the entire Mediterranean basin.
After overthrowing their monarchy, the Romans established a republic, a government with a brilliant system of checks and balances,
designed to prevent any one person from gaining too much power.
It was a mixed constitution featuring 3 branches. Executive power was held by 2 consuls, who commanded the army but were limited by a 1-year term.
The Senate, an advisory council of experienced former magistrates, wielded enormous influence over finances,
foreign policy, and the citizen assemblies provided a democratic element, electing officials and voting on laws and matters of war and peace.
This structure was founded on the principle of rule of law, first codified in the Law of the 12 Tables.
After a century of civil war brought the Republic to its knees, Augustus became the first emperor,
ushering in a 200-year period of stability known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace.
He sustained this golden age through brilliant administrative policies. He created a standing,
professional army to secure the vast frontiers. He reformed the tax system to be more efficient and less corrupt and established a civil service to govern the provinces accountably.
He and his successors invested heavily in infrastructure, building over 50,000 miles of durable roads, bridges, and aqueducts that facilitated trade, communication, and military movement, binding the empire together. But no empire lasts forever. Rome became overstretched, plagued by economic troubles, political
instability, and constant pressure on its borders. In the 5th century CE,
the Western Roman Empire finally collapsed, marking the end of the ancient world and the beginning of the Middle Ages.
From the ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the aqueducts of Rome, the story of the ancient world is a story of human ingenuity,
ambition, and perseverance. These civilizations rose and fell, but their echoes never faded. They are in the languages we speak, the laws we obey, the governments we form, and the technologies we use.
They all faced common challenges: the need for water, the desire for order, the quest for meaning.
Their stories remind us that we are part of a continuous human journey, built on the foundations they laid thousands of years ago.
By studying their past, we learn more about ourselves and our own place in the grand tapestry of history.
What ancient civilization fascinates you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.